Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! This happened about 4 years ago when my parents wanted to go to New York, but couldn't because they have 7 kids including me. We live on a farm and are homeschooled. Being the second eldest, I was in charge of teaching my younger siblings as well as myself. Usually, we would finish school at noonish if we started early enough. The reason that my older brother was not with us is because he decided to go to high school. My mom decided to call her childhood nanny to see if she was available, and of course she is. Everything goes according to plan and she's left alone with us. We finish our schoolwork and go outside and do what kids do. I was 15 at the time and my siblings ranged from 14 to 3 years old. We are roughhousing and jumping with our 3-year-old brother on our trampoline. She does not like this. She comes out yelling in Spanish that we did not have permission to be outside. We live in a predominantly Hispanic area, around 2 miles from the US/Mexico border. But most people we met are either bilingual or just speak English. We just speak English. My sister and I barely understand what she was conveying. She then comes and scolds us in Spanglish, meaning Spanish/English. We should not be slacking off and take care of our school. We try to tell her that we were done with our school for the day, but refuses to talk to us because we don't speak Spanish. This does not float well with us, especially because we are free-spirited farm kids with 600 acres, about 2.5 square kilometers, of pecan trees to roam. So she puts us in the schoolroom and leaves to go finish cooking lunch. My 9-year-old sister starts throwing a tantrum because she wanted to be on a trampoline. This causes my little brother to start crying. Me, being the oldest, makes eye contact with my other sister who's 14 years old, and we are both thinking the same thing. We tell the kids to be quiet and that we were going to leave after lunch. This almost instantly calms them down. Simultaneously, I leave the schoolroom and tell the nanny that I have to use a restroom. She simply says, "Andel," which means to hurry up. I go to my room and grab my good tennis shoes and a backpack. Then go to my little brother's room and grab wipes and diapers just in case. He's potty trained, but you never know. I walk back through the kitchen, hiding the bag best I can, and make it past her flawlessly to the pantry, which is around the corner from the kitchen. I grabbed a whole bunch of apples, bananas, and pears and threw them in the bag. Left the pantry and went back to the schoolroom. With impeccable timing, she then calls us to the kitchen to eat lunch. She gave us soba, and that's it. Just soba. For those of you who don't know, soba is like watery rice. It's a bomb, don't get me wrong. But feeding a whole bunch of kids a single bowl of soba and not allowing them to get any more is not very filling. We act like it's fine except for my 9-year-old sister and my little brother who say they want more. He responds with a simple no before they start crying, and we quickly grab them and tell them that it's all okay to remember what we said earlier. My youngest brother was a little bit harder to convince though. After we finished, we went back to the schoolroom, opened one of the windows, quietly removed the screen, and all of us started climbing out of the window. Our plan was to walk to my grandma's house, which is about a mile away, which we've done numerous times but without our baby brother. I just realized that this whole part is the first day, so I'm going to fast forward the rest of the week. Just imagine her cussing out in Spanish when we get home, and when my little brother goes to lay down for a nap and starts crying, she beats the crap out of him with a belt on the 5th day. After I hear her going ham on my brother, I'm at my wit's end. She walks out of his room and we're face to face. I was taller than her at the time due to the fact that I was abnormally tall for my age, and she was abnormally short. She tells me to move and yells in my face. Well, she was still holding the belt. I got so angry that I sucker punched her right in the eye socket, and she went down. When she got up holding her head, she was crying profusely. I felt no remorse. I spat in her face. To this day, I don't regret it. My parents got home the next day, grounded me, and forced me to work on a farm instead of doing schoolwork. I didn't mind it much because I'd rather be hoeing weeds out in a ditch than doing school. You thought that was the end? This is just where it gets spicy. About 3 months later, my parents want to take another vacation. Oh, but this time it's on business to Atlanta, Georgia. They didn't want me to break the nanny's eye sockets again, so they took me to my grandma's house that was approximately 40 minutes away from our house. Not the same grandma's house that was mentioned in the beginning of the story. I will get daily calls from all my siblings crying about how horrible she is. About 3 days in, the calls stop. I don't really pay much attention to this as I'm preoccupied doing chores for my grandparents. I later found out that she took the home base of our home phone and hid it because my siblings were making too many calls. Apparently, my sister, who is 9 years old, witnessed her hit herself repeatedly in the side of the head, took pictures of it with her phone, and sent it to my parents. She claimed that my sister, R, who is 14 years old, hit her in the head. My parents obviously knew something was up because my sister wouldn't hurt a fly. They had to end their business venture early and returned home and kicked the nanny out of the house. My mom got the stories from all of us, including me, and concluded that I never hit her and that my sister never hit her. Me, being the intelligent little 15-year-old I was, exclaimed to my parents that I wanted charges to be pressed against her, and my parents refused to press charges against her for some odd reason. So I took matters into my own hands and I called the cops on her and claimed that she was an illegal alien harboring herself in the US. What I didn't know is that she actually freaking was. I just wanted to get her in trouble, but ended up making her lose her entire livelihood, and she was deported back to Mexico. This happened about 15 years ago, relatively early in my career as a web developer/software engineer, so some details are not remembered precisely. Names changed and so on. Anyway, I thought I had landed a dream job at a small media company that had gone all in on digital media and marketing a few years prior and had started to land some big clients. Think NHS and so on. The team consisted of two owners. We will call them Jeff and Nige. Jeff was a light-hearted, approachable, and more tech-oriented member of this double act. Nige was a straight man, less approachable, and less likely to join us in any social antics, but ultimately a seemingly decent guy and the main driver of the business. In addition, there was an office manager, James, who also was Nige's other half, and Rachel, an office assistant and a good friend of Nige. The rest of the workforce made up the media team, which consisted of a senior and a junior designer, a senior and junior developer, and me, another senior developer. What made this a dream job for me at the time? Well, on top of the fact that they were doing some great work with what was at the time cutting-edge technology, it was an overall great place to be. Flexible working hours, lots of holidays, and lots of social events. To give you a better idea, most lunchtimes, Jeff and the media team would all go out for lunch together, or play a FIFA tournament, go to the pub to mop on a new idea, and so on. Most importantly for this story, every Friday we would all finish an hour early at 4 p.m. instead of 5 p.m. and head to the pub and have a couple or more drinks together. It was a very open place to work at the time, and the two owners were clear on how they expected the business to expand and our future positions within such an expanded company. Basically, all the guff any potential employer peddles when you interview, but we were actually doing it and living it. They were receptive to new ideas or different ways of doing things, and regularly included us in sales meetings, and we could see the direction the company was going in. Everybody who worked there was excited, and I honestly thought I would be there for the rest of my career. Things, however, change. As time went on, the company became more successful, and with more success came more recognition, more clients, more money, and greed. I won't go into too much detail, but by the time of the main event in this story a couple of years after starting there, this once open and relaxed workplace had become hell. There were no longer flexible hours. You had to be in at 8:50 a.m. to get ready at your machine, and you didn't power down until 5 p.m. at the earliest, unless you had been asked to stay late to turn out more work, unpaid by the way. No more lunchtime socials. There was a lunchtime rota that stated who could go for lunch and when, so we could no longer take lunch together. Despite the ever-growing workload of more complex and larger websites, no new members were added to the team. Even when the other lead developer left, no replacement was found. On top of this, despite the growing workload and shortening deadlines, promises of raises and bonuses never came to fruition, which was especially galling when coupled with the fact both owners were by now getting a new car every 6 months. Nige also made it clear that with the success of the company as it was, his plan was to sell it at the ripe age of 45, I think, and semi-retire to a life of travel, writing, and photography, despite being mediocre at both. Was that a second thought for the rest of us? The business was now being run in a manner that allowed the owners to line their pockets with as much cash as possible whilst also making it look like a good takeover prospect. The only perk that remained was a 4 p.m. Friday finish, which by this time, instead of all going for a drink together, we just went home early. Morale was low. One Friday afternoon, Nige, Jeff, and James went to visit a prospective client. Rachel was off for some reason, which left nobody in charge of the office. Expecting the usual early finish, everybody had completed their work by 4 p.m. But having not received any word from the owners, we hung on. At around 4:50 p.m., there was nothing else to do. We collectively decided to screw it, lock up, and go home. Apparently, at about 4:51 p.m., Nige had tried to call the office, probably to tell us to go home, but of course, we had already left. Monday morning, every one of us was called into the main office, giving a bollocking and told that a planned upcoming social was now cancelled. It probably already was anyway, but why not use it as a punishment? And that our wages were going to be docked for leaving early. Now, here in the UK, it's naughty to make deductions from a salary unless it's for some legally mandated reason. Example, taxes, national insurance, student loan, and so on. Or unless the employee has given explicit written permission. So I didn't think this last threat would actually happen. I didn't have to wait long to find out as we were paid weekly. But sure enough, that Friday, there was a deduction from my wages as well as everybody else on the media team. I approached the owners about it, but I was basically given the same speech as on Monday morning previous. Law has been a particular interest of mine, still is. And while I'm no lawyer, nor any kind of expert, I know enough to stand up for myself and those around me, and so, with the packing of the rest of the media team, I sent what may be considered a notice before action just prior to leaving on Friday. That notice before action being a formally worded email to both owners stating my grievance, the illegal deduction from salary, and my proposed resolution, the repayment of the deducted salary in our next wage, along with a formal apology to everyone on the team. Failure would mean the engagement of legal services. On Monday morning, the owners arrived late, and instead of Nigel's customary visit to the media room to ask how we were, making sure we were slaving away, they both retreated directly to their office and shut the door. This was shortly followed by an email to us all stating that due to my threat, and after taking legal advice, they had been told to cease direct communication with any of us until the matter was resolved. The resolution they wanted now being a full apology by me to them and the agreement that salary should remain deducted and any communication should be via email. Now, I'm reasonably sure they hadn't had any legal advice on the matter, or if they had, it was crap. Firstly, a decent solicitor would have told them that they were idiots for doing what they did and to give the money back and apologize. Secondly, because the entire point of a notice before action is to try and find a resolution prior to taking any legal action, in closing up shop in this manner, they are practically forcing a legal engagement. My belief is that they were simply calling my bluff and didn't believe I would take this any further. They reinforced this by adding to their email that any further communication about the deduction from our wages would need to come from my legal representation. I, of course, was not bluffing and complied with their request. But they didn't know that a member of my family was not only educated in employment law, albeit not an actual solicitor, but also a union representative at another company. So by the end of the day, a legally drafted letter arrived on the owner's desks, laying out the illegalities of what had happened, as well as the expected timeline of events going forward. Within 30 days, I think, we were to have had a formal meeting between the owners and myself, with me entitled to legal representation present in that meeting, and with the expectation that my demands in the NPA were to be met, as they had no defense. Should that not occur, this would be going to a tribunal, or maybe even full court with the company liable for expenses. It was a slam dunk, so they would end up with a relatively hefty bill. Instead of folding as I expected them to do, this led to them doubling down on their stupidity. Their door was permanently shut with very little direct communication between the whole media team and the owners, with it mostly being done by email or via Rachel and James. At this point, Rachel and James, who were obviously on good terms with Nige, became openly hostile towards me. For a small example, Rachel would make everyone in the office a coffee in the morning, and now it was everybody except me. Seemingly, neither the owners nor Rachel and James seemed to know or understand that I had the full backing of the rest of the team. They didn't have the know, how, or the will to fight it themselves, but they were aware of the downhill direction in the working environment and that my actions were preventing the owners from further taking the piss in the future. Now the environments had become exceptionally toxic and nobody wanted to be there. They and I started actively looking for different employment. If I remember correctly, an extension was requested and granted, but the deadline for the aforementioned meeting came and went, so my representative sent another formal letter to my employer stating that we would be going to tribunal. It also now stated that I would be leaving the company immediately and I will be claiming constructive dismissal due to the actions of the owners, James and Rachel, which had all logged over the previous weeks. The only result of the extension they requested being an extra few weeks of workplace bullying logged. Receiving all this was the last straw and the resolve was broken. An apology was sent via email along with a promise that the money will be returned in our next paycheck. I'd had enough, however, and I immediately handed in my notice, which I believe was 4 weeks. I hadn't found another job, but I had decided to move to the city anyway and go freelance. Before my notice period ended, the junior designer also handed her notice in, also to go freelance, and within a few months of me leaving, the junior developer and the senior designer had done the same. The business owned by Jeff and Nige was essentially dead, with many of their existing clients seeking us out to continue doing work for them on a freelance basis. I learned that Jeff and Nige eventually had a falling out, with Jeff resigning as a director and becoming CTO at another tech company. Nige renamed and rebranded the old company and attempted to carry on somehow, but to this day the examples of work on their webpage are still the ones we made 15 years ago. Most of them aren't actually his clients anymore or are defunct. I also later learned, as we all had suspected, that Jeff wanted nothing to do with the wage deductions and so on, although I'm not sure how hard he fought against it. Although I've not physically met them since the day I left, I am connected to everyone in the media team and they are all doing well. Jeff also reached out a few years later and he's doing well too. As for Nige, James and Rachel, I have no idea. Rachel was close to retirement anyway, so I guess she was reasonably fine. Looking at the public details of the business Nige now owns, it's clear that none of them makes any money and his travel and photography blogs stopped being updated a few years ago. Nige and James, as his partner, plans to retire early and travel the world are probably now permanently on hold, as is his penchant for a new car every few months, and the amount deducted from our wage over which Nige lost his business and planned future, £6.8. I'm sitting on my computer chatting with friends and realize I should probably make some dinner, so I get up, decide to fish some noodles and sauce out of the pantry, and might throw some kupasa in there. Start clearing off some workspace and my apartment door buzzer goes off. I sigh, knowing it's probably not me, but I answer anyway. Delivery, he says. I didn't order anything. No, wrong buzzer. And I hung up. He buzzes back again immediately. DoorDash delivery. I reply, who is it for? Samuel. I tell them there is no Samuel here. My name is Ninja. And I hang up. He buzzes back again. So fine, I answer and say, I'll take it if you really want. Buzz him in, and I assume he will figure out his mistake on the way up or something. Nope. He comes, drops it off at my door and knocks. I don my mask, open the door and tell him to take a picture of his delivery because someone's about to be pissed. He does so and walks away. Now, I don't blame him for a second. Delivery drivers, especially third-party services, get paid absolutely peanuts. Every second he's not driving is lost money. If my address is the address on his phone, he did his job. I take the very heavy bag into my house and plop it down on the table. I unwrap my loot. A can of soda, an order of sweet and sour chicken bowls, an order of ginger beef, an order of gyoza, and a small wonton soup. I'm Canadian, of course I feel a little guilty, and this is too big of a free buy. But I literally told him 3 times that it's not mine. My headache I've been fighting off all afternoon is thankful to not have had to cook, but someone else has essentially inherited my headache.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.